The Amazing Spider-Man, 1977. As shocking as it sounds, long before Sam Raimi's 2002 adaptation, there was a Spider-Man. Despite the fact that there was a fan film before it, the genuine title belongs to Spider-Man from 1977. There are several reasons for its oblivion. The 1977 version was a TV pilot that was turned into a film in which the iconic superhero battles with an evil self-help guru. Yep, this was definitely the 70s. Spider-Man began as a pilot that only screened in foreign theaters. It was unwillingly released on VHS later. As a result, Spidey began his career in the most unglamorous way possible. Spider-Man Strikes Back, 1978. Surprisingly, the original Spider-Man TV movie was so popular that it spawned an entire series, and even a film sequel. As a result, episodes from the television series were recut and released outside the US as Spider-Man Strikes Back a year later. In this movie, Spider-Man was shown to be more public with his exploits since the previous film, generating more newspaper headlines and attracting so much attention that a sassy reporter called Gail Hoffman decided she wanted to land the inside scoop on Spider-Man himself, and into Spider-Blue Man's tights, too.
Who's next?
Spider-Man 2002. The original Spider-Man was a gigantic cinematic undertaking that took 17 long years to come into fruition. Surprisingly, iconic director James Cameron came very close to making his own version of the movie in the 90s. Cameron wrote a 57-page script memo outlining his vision, and Stan Lee, Spidey's co-creator, gave his blessing to the filmmaker. But Carolka Studios' bankruptcy put a stop to those plans. The alterations didn't stop here. Green Goblin was also not the first option for the web-slinger's opponent. Original drafts featured Dr. Octopus as the antagonist, but screenwriter David Koepp introduced the Green Goblin when Sony began crafting its version, which director Raimi preferred. Spider-Man 2, 2004. Although Spider-Man 2 is usually regarded as one of the best superhero flicks, many fans would be startled by the bizarre elements that went into making it. In the original film, Doc Ock was going to team up with the Green Goblin to take on Spider-Man. However, because the film already had too many moving elements, Sam Raimi decided against it, and he was introduced in Spider-Man 2. Even though Tobey Maguire was set to be replaced by Jake Gyllenhaal due to Tobey's concerns over his back injury sustained during the shooting, he eventually ended up coming back. Get it? And even performed most of the stunts himself. Spider-Man 3, 2007. The final installment in Raimi's Spider-Man trilogy grossed $890.9 million worldwide, making it the highest-grossing film of the trilogy. But with a budget of $250 million, this was considered to be one of the most expensive films ever made. However, with the development of revolutionary CGI, the astronomical costs of shooting on location in New York at $1 million per day, and extensive reshoots, many industry insiders speculate a final tab of $350 million or more in production costs alone. Additionally, the visual effects needed to depict the Sandman's abilities took 3 years to build, and various sand experiments were carried out to better understand the dynamics of sand. The Amazing Spider-Man, 2012. The 2010s kicked off with Mark Webb's Amazing Spider-Man reboot, which also kicked off Andrew Garfield and Emma Stone's off-screen romance. Sony Pictures had started pre-production on Spider-Man 4, a direct sequel to the original film trilogy, before deciding to create this film as a reboot instead. Sony renegotiated contracts with director Sam Raimi and stars Tobey Maguire and Kirsten Dunst for a 3-film deal with the intention of launching a new trilogy in the series, with production expenses over $100 million. Raimi dissatisfied with the script, and tensions between Raimi, Maguire, and the studio growing, Sony decided to cancel the movie and reboot the series instead. The Amazing Spider-Man 2, 2014. The second movie of the planned trilogy was released in 2014 and was such a commercial and critical failure that Sony shut down the project entirely without even filming the third film. One of Spider-Man's most recognizable characters, the hilariously spiteful news boss J. Jonah Jameson, was never mentioned in this movie. He's mentioned several times in this sequel, but he never appears. According to the creators, they were unable to find an actor who could match J.K. Simmons' iconic portrayal of this character in Sammy Raimi's Spider-Man movie. Similar to the Sandman situation in Spider-Man 3, the VFX team studied electrical phenomena in great detail to nail Electro's look in the movie. Captain America: Civil War, 2016. Spider-Man's third iteration in the 21st century came not in the form of his own movie, but by introducing him to the Marvel Cinematic Universe through Captain America: Civil War. Sony Pictures first turned down Marvel's offer of a portion of the profits if they could bring Spider-Man over, but Sony Corporation was disappointed with the financial returns and critical reaction of the Amazing Spider-Man series and chose to renegotiate a contract. Tom Holland and Charlie Plummer were the only two candidates for the part of Spider-Man. Despite the casting choice being split, Holland was cast in the end, becoming the youngest person to portray Spider-Man at 19. Spider-Man: Homecoming, 2017.
I'm gonna die.
Tom Holland's Spider-Man finally got his own movie in 2017 with the release of Homecoming. The Amazing Spider-Man was not a success, with several critics complaining that it was too similar to previous Spider-Man films. So Marvel took a different direction by skipping over the origin story part entirely this time around. Avengers: Infinity War, 2018. Even though it wasn't a Spider-Man movie, Marvel's most ambitious crossover project converged with Infinity War, and Spider-Man was a huge part of the movie's success, even though he only had a screen time of 7.5 minutes in the movie. Because he exposed too many secrets in Spider-Man: Homecoming, Tom Holland was not allowed to see the script for this film. The movie ended up becoming the fourth movie to gross over $2 billion worldwide, and at the time of release, was the second most expensive movie in the Marvel Cinematic Universe and the second most expensive superhero movie of all time. Avengers: Endgame, 2019. The final installment of Marvel's third phase was also its longest film ever and took the world by storm, becoming the highest-grossing movie of all time, collecting more than $2.8 billion in box office sales. When it came to the idea of time travel, the writers consulted actual experts on quantum mechanics and time travel. Endgame is said to have cost between $350 to $400 million to make. This makes it one of the most costly films ever made. A sneak peek of Spider-Man: Far From Home was included in the post-credits scene added for the re-release of this film, setting up the stage for what was to come next. Spider-Man: Far From Home, 2019. Marvel's fourth phase started off with the next chapter of Spider-Man's life, 8 months after the events of Avengers: Endgame. Mysterio was supposed to be one of the villains in Sam Raimi's canceled Spider-Man 4, but the film never saw the light of day. Throughout the film, Jake Gyllenhaal is practically never seen without his full superhero costume. It was suggested to him that he change into something else for various sequels.